Let's talk about vaccinations. Very often, I avoid answering your questions when you ask if I vaccinated my son, if I got vaccinated myself, which ones, when, and why. If I give advice and you have a vaccine complication, you might blame me for suggesting it. If I discourage you from getting vaccinated and you or your child gets sick with complications, you'll say, Alexander told us not to do it. So let's approach this episode rationally today, and I'll say right away, you won't regret anything because you'll be the one making the decision. But you'll know absolutely everything, how it works, how it's structured. We'll lay everything out clearly in your mind in this episode. By the way, don't forget that you have the full right to refuse preventive vaccination, so if someone at work is forcing you, keep that in mind. I'll say even more, no one has the right to judge you for your decision. It's your life, your responsibility, because it's not that simple. And by law, the doctor is also required to inform you about this. And to explain that if you refuse, there will be certain consequences, but if you go through with it, there will be other consequences. So the purpose of today's episode is purely informational. I'll explain the difference between viruses and bacteria, why only vaccination can protect you from certain diseases, and how vaccines and immunity actually work. After all, when you're deciding whether to do it or not, your main goal is to avoid getting sick, but at the same time, you don't want to experience any complications. With this information, you'll be able to make your own decision about your health when you see the full picture and understand what you're agreeing to or what you're refusing. Let's start by understanding immunity. It's a very complex system made up of many levels. Simply put, it's your personal army, like a private security service that protects your interests. It can distinguish between what's part of you and what's foreign, and when it detects a threat at your body's entrance, it responds. If it's a virus, bacteria, or a cancerous tumor, the immune system must resist and fight it. And at the core of this system are two types of immunity. The first is our well-known innate immunity. It's like a border guard. Innate immunity sees the intruder, and naturally, when it notices someone crossing the border, it opens fire on them. And the second type is acquired immunity. This is what we learn throughout our lives. It develops, of course, over the course of our entire life. When we encounter infections, and also thanks to vaccines, especially actively during the first 2 to 3 years of life. And its main strength is that it remembers every enemy by sight. It's like in a police station where they have wanted posters hanging up. If the first encounter with infections takes days or weeks to react, it's like recognizing a repeat offender. The face becomes familiar. If this enemy shows up again, the immune system will quickly recognize it and, of course, quickly neutralize it and take action. It's precisely because of this mechanism that you don't get sick with something like chickenpox twice. If you had it as a child, then it's no longer a threat to you. From our army, yes, let's move on to the enemy army, those we fight against, so to speak, the criminals. And the pathogens that cause diseases are also divided into several types. The main ones, the first ones, are bacteria. They are living organisms, independent single-celled forms of life. They have their own metabolism and many proteins. They are necessary for life and for health. Reproduction. So essentially, these are independent, self-sufficient units. And we, humans, have learned to fight these bacteria, including with the help of vaccines and antibiotics. And believe me, this was a tremendous discovery. The average human lifespan increased by 25 years. You can learn more about antibiotics in my film. If we defeat all cancer, the average lifespan of the entire population will only increase by 2 years. That's why Fleming's discovery is so significant. A virus is a different matter. It's not a cell, it's something else. Some even believe it's an artificial form of life, a separate one. It's much smaller, 100 times smaller. Essentially, viruses are intracellular parasites, and when they enter a cell, the virus reprograms its mechanisms, forcing it to create copies of itself. It's like a little factory. And then the host cell bursts and naturally dies. The viruses are released and infect new cells. They spread throughout the body, multiplying. And scientists still argue about whether viruses should even be considered alive. After all, they don't have their own metabolism, they don't grow, they don't divide on their own. They only reproduce when they enter a host cell. It would seem that if there's a disease, then there should probably be some kind of protection or a cure. And humanity is relatively successful at protecting itself from bacteria with antibiotics. But how successful? Bacteria also adapt and learn, and many antibiotics no longer work. But there's another question. So why can't we just invent similar antiviral drugs and treat ourselves with them? The first reason? A virus integrates into a cell, and to kill it, you need to block cellular processes and prevent the virus from reproducing inside the cell. You know it's not always possible to do this. It's difficult and takes a lot of work. But how do you do that? And in such a way that you don't harm the cell itself. After all, the cell is us. Without cells, we can't live. That's why the drug has to be complex. It has to be absolutely safe for your normal body, for your health, for the cells, for our organs. That's not always possible. And that's why there's another reason why things aren't so simple with viruses. Viruses reproduce at an incredible speed. And during this process, a lot of mutations occur. That is, different clones, variations. They seem to be similar to each other, but they're already different. And naturally, every mutation, every alteration is a new variant. And naturally, the medicine will lose its relevance quite quickly because it was targeted, this vaccine or this drug, at a completely different strain. And a good example is the human immunodeficiency virus, commonly known as HIV. It's one of the few viruses for which there is antiviral therapy. Naturally, during the time of Freddie Mercury, who passed away quite quickly from this virus, this therapy did not exist. But there's one problem. Unfortunately, the virus doesn't die completely, there's just less of it. The therapy simply keeps it under control. The therapy can, of course, be taken for life, and today people with the human immunodeficiency virus live quite long lives. But if a person stops taking the medication, the virus instantly becomes active and starts multiplying at a tremendous rate, constantly mutating in the process. And when the concentration of the medication in the body drops, only those strains survive, and remember this very well, that turn out to be resistant to the drug. These are more aggressive, more dangerous, a new version. Naturally, the disease becomes difficult to control. Even if the therapy is resumed, unfortunately, its effectiveness drops significantly. And unfortunately, as you know, people often stop therapy as soon as they feel better. There are probably only a handful of antiviral drugs with proven effectiveness, and the only way to fight most viruses is to support your immune system with a healthy lifestyle. For example, people often come and say, "Cure my human papillomavirus." I tell them, you don't need to treat it, you need to work on your immunity. Just strengthen it. There is no magic pill that you're asking for. As always, on one hand, it's simple, but on the other hand, it's complicated, because you want someone else to solve it for you. And when it comes to health, you need to make decisions on your own through daily, everyday actions. The first and most basic thing is nutrition. I'm tired of saying it, but a balanced diet is key to health. It's been proven that a deficiency of vitamins, especially B, D, and C vitamins, as well as a lack of zinc and selenium, reduces the effectiveness of the immune response. And that's why, if you want to be a healthy person, you need to eat a well-balanced diet. And this isn't about taking vitamins. It's specifically about proper nutrition. Because vitamins are only taken as a supplement to your main diet, and they won't do the work for you. We have a contest. Vitamins Ipsum, my own factory. Nothing but my own Ipsum vitamins is produced at this factory. I'd like to hold a little contest for those who watched up to this part of the video. Write a comment about why it's important to stay healthy, and I'll pick 5 lucky winners and probably give away 5 Ipsum vitamin gift sets. I'm very proud, I love it. I've been doing all this with all my heart for a long time, and I really hope these vitamins will bring you good health. The second important component of a strong immune system is moderate physical activity. It improves the circulation of immune cells throughout the body and helps reduce chronic inflammation. It has been proven that regular exercise, especially weight training, helps the muscles release molecules that fight tumor growth. Cancer risks also decrease. It's important to eliminate chronic stress, lack of sleep, smoking, alcohol, and excess weight, as all reduce immune protection. However, it's important to understand one very important thing. All the measures listed only strengthen innate immunity. Basically, you already have a weapon, you're just maintaining it by cleaning and oiling it. But only vaccination can provide you with the ammunition and skills to fight specific viruses. So, you have a rifle, but maybe you're good at hunting birds with it, but you've never hunted deer. How does a vaccine work? A vaccine contains weakened, killed, or artificially created parts of a virus that cannot cause the disease themselves. Yes, you might feel them after the injection, but you won't get sick. But the immune system reacts to these particles, produces antibodies, and forms memory cells. And if after that the real virus enters the body, the already trained immune system will recognize it instantly and destroy it before the disease develops. It's like training with pads during sparring. On fight day, you already know the opponent, are familiar with his signature moves, and know how to beat him. Or, for example, the illness itself can also be much milder, even if you do get sick. And the main criticism of COVID vaccination was, I got the vaccine, but I still got sick. Yes, but in theory, it's not a 100% guarantee that you won't get sick, but ideally you should get sick less severely, and the likelihood of a fatal outcome will be much lower. After all, sometimes death from the virus occurs before the immune system has time to produce antibodies. And studies, for example, conducted at the height of the COVID pandemic, confirmed the link between mortality and the speed of the immune response. So there simply wasn't enough time to start fighting the virus, unfortunately. There's also herd immunity. That's another interesting thing that definitely needs to be mentioned. It's the protection of the population from a contagious disease. And it appears when many people already have personal immunity to the virus or bacteria. It was exactly when herd immunity appeared that our restrictions were lifted and people were allowed to go without masks. And there are two ways to form herd immunity. The first is what we had in our country, mass vaccinations. This is considered a fairly convenient and fairly controllable method. Naturally, there were questions about the vaccine, but now looking back, we're all very wise. The second method, which is more experimental and extreme, is infecting and then having the majority of the population recover. When I was sick, my wife stayed with me and said, let me get sick too so we can solve this together. If most people are protected, it becomes harder and harder for viruses to spread. Because as they say, the virus has fewer ways to spread. And that's why the outbreak of diseases dies down. But when no one in the country had had this COVID virus, it was very easy for it to spread. A good example is the Spanish flu epidemic in the early 20th century. You've probably heard its other name, the Spanish flu. And about 50 million people became victims. There were no medicines or vaccines back then, and almost everyone got sick. And the survivors naturally got sick and developed immunity after the disease left them. Unfortunately, a lot of people died. By the way, every disease has its own threshold for herd immunity. This means the percentage of people who need to have immunity to a disease for it to stop spreading. That is, so the incidence rate drops. Remember, in the live COVID stats, the infection curve was always declining. The principle is simple. The more contagious the disease, the more people need to develop immunity to it. For example, measles is the most contagious virus in human history. If someone in your building gets sick and you walk by, you'll get sick too. To prevent an epidemic, up to 95% of people need immunity. Dear friends, I am at my clinic on Avtozavodskaya 16. We have a large inpatient facility. There are many specialties. We deal with oncology, urology, and gynecology. The clinic now performs operations of absolutely any complexity under my supervision, and we have gladly assembled a team, the best specialists from federal centers and state clinics, those who have extensive practical experience. We are ready to take on absolutely any complex cases to fight for your health, so don't hesitate, don't be afraid to reach out. We will do our best to help each one of you. Thanks to vaccines, we have herd immunity against most infections. We all go to daycare centers, we all go to school, to work, and that's why diseases spread quite easily and quickly in our community. We have a rather densely populated society. But the paradox is that vaccines have become victims of their own success. When diseases retreated thanks to vaccination, the fear of them disappeared. But the fear of side effects from vaccines remained. Indeed, both aspirin and any medication have some side effects. Aspirin has whole lists of side effects like this. Your skin is supposed to peel off. And it would seem, yes, already forgotten diseases are reappearing because the percentage of vaccinated people is decreasing. For example, I have a mark on my shoulder. It's from a vaccine that no one gets anymore. The annual report of Rospotrebnadzor showed us that in Russia, the incidence of diseases that seem to have been defeated is increasing. For example, measles and rubella. And they are very dangerous, especially if a woman is pregnant or planning to conceive. The situation with measles is especially alarming. Over the year, the incidence of measles has almost doubled. Rospotrebnadzor noted that almost 90 of those who fell ill were not vaccinated. Measles is dangerous because of its severe complications. It can cause pneumonia, blindness, encephalitis, and can also be fatal. And for example, right now we don't admit patients to our hospital department unless you have a certificate that you've had the disease or a certificate confirming immunity. Rospotrebnadzor also noted a significant increase above the long-term average incidence rates for rubella, whooping cough, and mumps. Mumps, by the way, is very dangerous for men because men who had mumps when they were young, unfortunately, often come to us later with infertility. They can't have children, so it's not such a harmless disease. All these diseases were practically defeated by vaccination back then. So far, smallpox is the only disease that has completely disappeared worldwide thanks to vaccination. I actually have a scar from it myself. And the last known case happened in England in 1978. And in 1980, the WHO officially declared smallpox eradicated worldwide. But the vaccines exist, and for some time they continue to be given. So friends, this is a contest or a giveaway, take it however you like. At our BioCheck clinic on Avtosavodskaya 16, we offer comprehensive checkup services. You get admitted to the hospital, and during the day you get everything done, starting with ultrasound, ECG, lab tests, and finishing with gastroscopy, colonoscopy under anesthesia, MRI, and CT scans. And when you leave us, you go with the confidence that you have no health problems. And most importantly, we are so confident in ourselves that we give a 100% guarantee that within a year after your visit, no hidden cancers will appear. And in that case, we give a 100% guarantee of a full refund of all the money you spent, because we are the best. And I would like to give away this kind of checkup. To participate, you need to write a comment under this video and explain why you need it. By the way, you can also give this checkup as a gift to someone. So leave your comments and take part in the giveaway. A large number of illnesses have receded, and the average life expectancy has increased by several decades. Can you imagine that? By several decades. And at the same time, if we were to defeat all cancer on planet Earth in a single day, the overall life expectancy would only increase by 3.5 years. But because we've already conquered those diseases, life expectancy has increased by several decades. There is a whole list of diseases that have receded thanks to vaccination. Once again, I'm just telling you the facts. Mumps, it's commonly called that. Before the vaccine, mumps epidemics occurred every 5 years. Like a dragon flying into a village and taking away girls, it would, you could say, take away the health of boys. Measles, before the vaccine, killed more than 2.5 million people every year. Do you know many people who died from measles? The situation changed thanks to the vaccine that Maurice Hilleman was able to create. This American virologist developed a total of 36 vaccines, 8 of which are still in use today. These are vaccines against chickenpox, meningitis, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, mumps, and rubella. The incidence of rubella has also decreased thanks to vaccination. For children, this disease is usually not dangerous and is similar to a common cold, but if a pregnant woman contracts rubella, the consequences can be catastrophic for her child. One example is the very sad and tragic story of the 1940s Hollywood star Jean Tierney. During her pregnancy, she was infected by a fan who got past security to reach her. Well, to get an autograph, shake hands, maybe even hug her. The terrible thing was that she knew she had rubella and ignored it just to meet her idol. So what did we get in the end? In the end, that's what we got. The actress's daughter, who was born with a severe disability, was blind, deaf, intellectually disabled, and needed constant care. And all of this was because of a careless attitude toward the virus. Jean Tierney fell into a deep depression, and it was after the actress's public speeches in the US that the campaign for rubella vaccination began. People often don't act until a problem affects them directly. This occurs in Russia and many other countries too. Another disease that has been pushed back thanks to vaccination is tetanus. It affects the nervous system, causing painful spasms in all the muscles of the body. Without treatment, the mortality rate reaches 70%, and for newborns, it's almost 100%. The tetanus vaccine was developed in the 1920s, and I received it just like you probably did, because it's part of the standard vaccination schedule. And thanks to mass vaccination in developed countries, the disease has become rare and is practically not seen today. Whooping cough. I remember in kindergarten, a boy had whooping cough. It's also called the 100-day cough. It's a terrible cough, and the attacks can really last for 2 or even 3 months. A person just can't stop during these attacks. They can't breathe. Whooping cough is often fatal for children under 2 years old. Before the vaccine appeared in the 1940s, about 10,000 people died every year in the US. Today, thanks to vaccination, the incidence has decreased by 99%. Diphtheria, another disease, a deadly bacterial infection that affected the respiratory tract. In the late 80s, people in the USSR began to refuse vaccination en masse, and the percentage of those who were vaccinated against this bacterium dropped below 70%. Although to contain the disease, at least in this case, 85% of the population needed to have immunity. What do you think the result was? That's right. As a result, there was a diphtheria epidemic in the 90s which could only be stopped by mass vaccinations. Unfortunately, we don't always learn from the mistakes of the past. Hepatitis is also dangerous. It can cause severe liver failure with a fatal outcome. And since the introduction of the hepatitis vaccine, cases of infection have naturally decreased by as much as 95%. Poliomyelitis, a terrible disease, has also been defeated by vaccination. In the middle of the 20th century, there was a real epidemic of this terrible disease in Europe and North America. The mortality rate from poliomyelitis reached 20%, and about half of those who survived were left paralyzed. At that time, almost 60,000 people fell ill in the United States. More than a third of them were left paralyzed, and about 3,000 died. Most of the victims were children. A real panic began among parents, and children were not allowed outside. Swimming pools were closed, movie theaters and libraries weren't working. All of this was done to limit children's contact with the outside world. It was at that time that the American boy Paul Alexander fell ill with polio. Doctors saved his life, but he was paralyzed and couldn't breathe on his own. Then he, like other children with the same complications, was placed in an iron lung. This device is a sealed pressure chamber about 2 meters long and weighing around 300 or 400 kilograms. And inside the pressure alternated. This pumped air into the lungs, and most people placed in iron lungs did not survive for long. But Paul was not one of them. He managed to live another 70 years. By 1960, iron lungs had become obsolete. They were replaced by more compact and efficient ventilators, but Paul continued to live in his cylinder. He got used to it. He died, by the way, when he turned 78, but he is remembered for being listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the person who lived the longest in an iron lung and remained its last inhabitant in the world. At the same time, he worked as a lawyer, managed to find a wife, and was a happy family man. During the polio epidemic, there weren't enough iron lungs for everyone, just like we didn't have enough ventilators for everyone during COVID. A solution to the problem had to be found. In 1956, at the height of the Cold War, 3 Soviet scientists were sent to the United States. One of them was Mikhail Chumakov. The American scientist Albert Sabin had already developed a polio vaccine by that time, but mass vaccination in the United States had not yet begun. Our scientists had to negotiate the supply of Sabin's live vaccine strains. On the return flight to the USSR, the Soviet scientists carried with them a small suitcase containing monkey kidneys with weakened poliovirus inside. Thanks to this, the production of Salk's vaccine was established in the USSR. However, Ministry of Health officials hesitated to authorize the trials. A live vaccine is, after all, a live virus, and no one wanted to take on that kind of responsibility. Then Mikhail Chumakov personally called the deputy chairman of the USSR Council of Ministers, Anastas Mikoyan. The deputy chairman was very concerned about the future of his many grandchildren and asked only one question: "Is the vaccine good?" After receiving an affirmative answer, Mikoyan said only one word: vaccinate. And in 1960, 2 million children and teenagers had already been vaccinated in the USSR. And just a year later, almost 80% of the population had been vaccinated. And poliomyelitis, which just yesterday in the USSR was a scourge of the country, is now almost completely gone. For the most interesting question about vaccines, I will give my subscriber a book with my autograph, my book Genesis, a book about health, longevity, good habits, sports, and motivation. And it will bring great benefit to whoever receives it. And I'll give it away to the person with the smartest and funniest question under this video. So write. Medicine has never lived and will never live by the past alone. The great and grand Soviet developments remain only as a foundation. Medicine is constantly moving forward, developing, and one of the brightest examples today is the creation of personalized anti-tumor vaccines, which, by the way, I also wrote about on my social media. And you often ask me, is this a vaccine where you get a shot and don't have cancer anymore? No. Actually, this is an anti-tumor vaccine for those who are already sick. And imagine at the end of last year, the Russian Ministry of Health approved the use of 2 such cancer vaccines. The first drug is the personalized vaccine Neoncovac for the treatment of melanoma. And by the way, vaccine therapy for melanoma has been used around the world for years now. And the vaccine is intended for adult patients with inoperable or metastatic skin melanoma, those who are already dying and whose prognosis is grim. And by the way, it is also used to prevent recurrences after tumor removal in addition to the main treatment. And the second drug is the peptide vaccine Oncopept. It was created for the treatment of metastatic colorectal cancer. That's bowel cancer. It's a young disease now, increasingly affecting younger people. That's especially bad since COVID, as it started impacting even younger ages. And all these drugs are really made individually for each patient. For this, they take a sample of the tumor that the person has, for example, from a metastasis. They find unique mutations in them, and based on this data, they create a vaccine that allows the immune system to recognize and attack cancer cells without harming healthy ones. And Russia really became the first country in the world that now, so to speak, draws for our immunity, for our army. These descriptions, photos, and composite sketches are, so to speak, posted in our army and police units. And our immune cells, seeing what's in the cancer, what it looks like, fight it more effectively, and combat it. Everything actually works very simply. We just enhance the natural mechanisms, and our own immune system does the work for us. So, to be honest, I don't really understand those people who are opponents of cancer vaccines. I believe that the medicine of the future is not about surgery, and in fact, most surgery, especially cancer surgery, will disappear precisely because of the development of drug therapy. The future of oncology lies in drug therapy, and vaccine therapy is a part of it. Even in my own career, I have seen significant changes not only in surgery, but also in drug-based approaches. The number of patients who undergo surgery at stage 3 or 4 has significantly decreased, and the focus is shifting toward drug therapy. And patients live longer on drug therapy than when they undergo surgery at stage 3 or 4, and I think this trend will become even stronger in the future. Most likely, only those for whom surgery brings a radical cure will undergo surgery, and everyone else will switch to drug therapy. I hope you now understand how immunity works and how everything is arranged, and you should realize that, of course, any vaccine, just like any medication, has side effects. This is normal. But there are also a huge number of complications in people who get sick and haven't been vaccinated, and the numbers that were announced today are truly frightening. Many people say, it's my life, I decide for myself, but we must not forget that as long as you live in society, your life, unfortunately, is not limited to just you. And by your choice, you didn't get vaccinated and got sick, but at the same time, you infected a huge number of people around you. And someone you infected, for example, some elderly lady, got sick with some illness and couldn't survive it because of her age, or on the contrary, maybe it was a child. Therefore, by taking responsibility for your life and putting that responsibility in your own hands, on the one hand, unfortunately, you don't bear the consequences of that choice alone for long. It's not just about yourself. It's not like a tattoo that you got and only you have to deal with. Unfortunately, your choice affects other people in society, so it needs to be a well-considered one. And I see, unfortunately, a huge number of really scary anti-vaxxers who attribute to vaccines a lot of things that, well, have nothing to do with them at all. That's why the most important thing is to make your choice not based on superstition, but strictly on scientific facts and scientific approaches that explain how the immune system works and why vaccination is needed at all. Naturally, since vaccines are a source of profit in many countries, there can sometimes be some excesses. Vaccines are sometimes released early and research results may be presented more favorably. That happens too, and if I only give you black and white information, you probably wouldn't even believe me. So I completely understand that some people make money off vaccines somewhere, but there is a basic optimal set of vaccines, a standard vaccination schedule, and that's what I still recommend sticking to. Have a good day.